Welcome to the 323 podcast, where we look at how faith and work intersect. Each week, we talk to business leaders and difference makers about honoring God in the way we lead, create, and serve, because in everything we do, our work can reflect the one we serve. Today, we have the privilege of welcoming back Scott Willingham. He was on our previous episode, and if you missed our last episode, you can find it at 323podcast.com or search for the 323 podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Scott is the founder and CEO of Wake Effect, a Las Cruces-based consulting firm. He is an ASLAN certified partner and a certified predictive index partner as well. And we spend a little time just barely scratching the surface on these two tools in our last episode. So I look forward to digging in a little bit more today. Scott, welcome to the 323 podcast.
Tiffany, great to be back with you. Thanks for having me.
So we talked a little bit about predictive index in the last episode and how leaders can take that tool, apply it, and immediately begin to see the results of a more engaged workforce. Yeah. Today, I want to dig into ASLAN, this sales methodology that you chose. And I know you shared with us previously that the founder is a Christian, and our listeners very likely will recognize the name ASLAN from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. Yes. So tell us a little bit more about the connection, why ASLAN, and what is at the heart of this sales training? Because there's lots of sales training out there, much like there's lots of personality profiles. That's right. But you selected this one for a reason. So tell me a little bit more about that.
I did. When I went out to Roswell, Georgia, to their headquarters, and I watched Tom deliver a workshop, he was talking about his faith and how that integrated, and I took notes for 2 days as a participant, but also ASLAN, at the end of all of their workshops, does a post-course survey. They ask for real feedback, the unfiltered truth.
That's great.
One of those questions is, and it hit me the first time I ever saw it and sat through Tom's workshop, one of the questions is, can you take anything that you have learned in this workshop and apply it to your personal life, to your family, to your friends, to your community? And that stuck with me. And I thought, this is about more than sales. This is kind of flows in line. I'd already started Wake Effect and was using the predictive index with companies to help with hiring and leading their people, the talent they already have. But this, I was like, this is transformational. This stuff goes beyond a transaction, beyond a sale, beyond a commission, with a much greater purpose. And I saw Tom living that out in the workshop with a bunch, people from Cisco and Shaw Industries, and a lot of large companies were there. And so it blew me away, and it was named after the lion. He was reading the book to his 4 children 30 years ago. Oh, wow. And he and the other co-founder, Tom and Tab, who'd been friends a long time, they decided to name it ASLAN because of what the lion represented, which is the ultimate in sacrifice and putting others before yourself.
Oh, wow. So that leads right into my next question of, from what I understand, you shared this book with me called Unreceptive by the founder, Tom Stanfill.
Yes.
And it is other-centered selling is basically the principle that encompasses everything they do. So what is other-centered sales?
Yeah, so ASLAN teaches the sales methodology on a bunch of human principles and biblical principles.
Great.
They don't call it out necessarily that way. Again, just the struggle sometimes to integrate your faith directly with, non-faith-based organizations.
Sure,
but they call out these principles that are true because behavior follows beliefs. And so whatever we believe or whatever we fear or whatever our goals, right, we're going to behave in certain ways that try to achieve that or avoid certain things. And so they teach these human principles. And one of those principles is the default principle is that we default to self, that our self is who we serve and our self is the most important thing. And so if that's true, then we have to make the decision, the conscious decision and effort to be other-centered before you maybe on a inside sales rep answers the next phone call every single time even. Yeah. Some people go, I got to make the decision before I answer this call not knowing what's on the other end of the line, or before I walk in to meet with this prospect at their place of work, to be other-centered, that make it about them and not about me.
And you have to be so intentional with that, because many of us, as we enter into this world of sales, we're thinking about our job performance, our commission, our paycheck, our business, that, things are riding on making that sale. And so it's so true that our natural instinct is to be thinking about me. I think one of the things I read in this book, if I remember correctly, is that studies have shown we think about ourselves 95% of the day. Am I getting that statistic right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you are literally swimming against the tide to be other-centered.
Yes.
So tell me some of the ways that your faith impacts the way you deliver this training and the way it impacts how we do sales.
Yeah. So again, I love those principles because they're something that I believe in very heavily. I know that personally I struggle with selfishness. And again, that's probably the largest struggle of every human.
Me too.
Yeah, is that desire to serve yourself.
Yeah.
And so with that as a backdrop, it's like, okay, we're fighting against this. And if you have real faith in the God of the Bible and Jesus, right, it is about service. And this selling is all about serving others. There are sales training firms out there that are great methodologies and they're very successful, but some of those even go as far as to say sales is not serving. And ASLAN, we believe it is serving, because if you're doing what's in the best interest of the other person and whatever you're selling, and I've worked with companies that sell oil pipeline cleaning products.
Oh my goodness, that's very niche.
I've trained sales reps and leaders for companies that sell online oncology pharmaceuticals to people that can't afford medicine. And it's something that really tugs at the heartstring a lot more than pipeline cleaning products for oil companies. The reality is, whatever you're selling, if it's helping an organization, helping a person, and you believe in that product, then when you mix that with doing the right thing by the person that you are speaking to one-on-one and making the decision to be other-centered, when you combine those two things together, I do believe sales is a noble calling. And we train and set as a goal with every group that we work with that this methodology, if you follow it, you actually will sleep better at night, because you can lay your head on the pillow and realize you've made a difference in the world, one person at a time, potentially selling your product or your service. But if you do what's in their best interest at all times, no matter what that means, maybe even recommending a competitor to them over your product or service, then you sleep better at night because you served, you helped people and enrich their life or their company if it's B2B sales. And so that's really the goal every single time we train people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love just how that aligns with who we want to be as Christians.
Yeah.
And I just immediately think of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. And
that's right.
That's who we want to be. We want to be servant leaders, and that I love the idea that that can be true of us in sales as well.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest ways my life changed when I stepped into this role as a full-time C12 chair is that I went from a role where I was 100% focused on operations to a role where I have to balance. I have to do both. And I'm sure you feel this too, is like I got to run a business, but I also have to do sales. I had always identified myself as someone who was bad at sales and could not do sales. So first, I want you to speak to that. Are there personalities and people who just can't do sales?
So the predictive index, and sometimes I mix the two things together, right? Because one is about identifying the talent you're hiring and getting the talent to be more engaged at work and putting them in the right position. So yes, the predictive index has 17 different profiles.
Okay.
There are certainly some, if you said it's an outside sales role that manages a territory versus an inside sales role that is solely on the phone, there's profiles that would be better than another at those unique types of selling roles. But all 17 I've seen be good at sales.
Okay.
And so there isn't a profile or a person out there that can't be good at sales. ASLAN's really made their mark with a lot of organizations, of course, training a lot of traditional sellers. They have sales in the title. They're paid commissions. I mean, it is a sales role. But they have also trained a ton of customer service people in organizations.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of other operations people in organizations that touch the customer and need to be better
Absolutely.
at influencing and growing receptivity and growing the brand. But frankly, a lot of people that in non-traditional sales roles that think sales is a negative word or a dirty word, and they're skeptical. They're not interested. They're not receptive to the training that their organization is having them go through. But ASLAN's approach is not scripts and pressure, but it's helping and serving and trying to get people in the class or the workshop to believe that they don't have an opportunity to sell. They have an obligation to sell if selling means helping and serving that person in whatever way they can.
You know, I love that. I love to dispel those myths that I'm bad at something or I can't learn something just because it's not part of my profile, my personality profile. And I do think we want to look at that data from the predictive index and say, how can I operate for the most part in my strengths? But also, some of us don't have an option. You know, most of us will have parts of our job that are not part of our strength. And how do we learn how to grow and develop those roles, even that are not our strengths?
Yeah.
So, let's talk about dropping the rope. That's one. And for our listeners, I'm going to link to this book in the show notes. So make sure you check the show notes. I will link to this book and to all of Scott's information. But one of the first things he talks about is dropping the rope. And that it was just very enlightening to me. I loved that concept. So tell me what that means.
Yeah, so I'll back up just a little bit, but we talk about it at ASLAN, selling is serving. And if you really want to serve the person in front of you, whether it's B2C sales or B2B sales or inside or customer service, if you really want to serve that person, you got to get to know that person, and they have to know that they are the priority first and foremost, that it's about them. It isn't about you. You try to not have commission breath and think about your goals and think about where you're at this month or this quarter, where you're at with your boss. But you put them, nothing else matters in that moment, whether it's a 1-minute phone call or it's a 1-hour Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting over lunch. Nothing else matters but getting to know that person. And there's different ways, obviously, you get to know them. But number one, that everyone you talk to has a stated business need. If they walk into a car dealership, I'm looking for a car. Or if they walk into Best Buy, I'm looking at a TV or a washing machine. Well, that's a stated need. That's easy to uncover and to handle. But then how about unstated needs? What are the problems, the pain points, the barriers? What are they bringing in that you don't know yet, and you need to uncover that? And then there's emotional needs that everyone has, which is to be loved, heard, respected, and valued. And so if you can start to touch all of those things, then what we like to say is every single person you sell to has PTSD. They have post-traumatic sales disorder. All of us, everyone that's an adult, has had an experience where whether it's on the phone with a telemarketer or it is maybe at a car dealership or an electronics store, where they've been pressured. And so the 2 P's are, number one, you're the priority, I'm not. So I make the decision to be other-centered, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a few ways. And the other one is relieve pressure wherever you can, because, only 30% of people in sales in the United States hit their quota in 2024. LinkedIn published that statistic.
Wow.
And roughly about the same, so 70% miss goal. Roughly about that same percentage, it's in the 70s, of people polled say, I don't want to talk to a salesperson. Oof. And because of things like Amazon and Carvana and Driveway and lots of other things, BestBuy.com, I can purchase my electronics or my new car or used car, and I don't have to talk to a sales professional at all.
That's a truth.
And there's no haggle on pricing. And so because that's a growing trend, why? Because people have post-traumatic sales disorder. They have been pressured to make decisions that afterwards they kicked themselves and felt like they'd been taken. And so we say, hey, dropping the rope means relieve pressure at every point. Well, how do you do that? What does that mean? It means you live in reality first and foremost.
Sure.
If you're selling B2B to a company, that company's been in business for a year or 51 years before you walked in the door, and they're going to be in business for another 5 or 10 or 50 years after you walk out their door. So the reality is they don't have to have you and your product or service to continue to be doing business, and maybe even doing business extremely well. So if I acknowledge that I'm not I'm not the golden goose that lays a golden egg, and they have to have what I have, but I have to earn it. I have to earn the right to be heard, to be able to represent my product or service. Just living in reality helps relieve the pressure, and then say, you've got options. I don't own your business, and I don't write the checks for your company. You do. And so you may or may not choose our product or service, and that's okay. What matters more than anything is that you accomplish the goals that you have for your company, your team, and how I can serve you in any way to make that happen is what my goal is, or ultimately important. Also, we teach people to ask permission. So you may have called in to me and I picked up the phone at my company, but still ask permission, which seems counterintuitive. It's like, well, they called you. Of course, they expect you to ask questions, but ask permission to ask certain questions. Ask permission to present a recommendation of your product or your service. And I've had people, when we've trained before, say, Scott, I thought sales was really leading and challenging the people and kind of manipulating them to where you want them to go. Yeah. And I say, it's quite the opposite. It's that every opportunity I have, whether it's a phone call or an in-person meeting or a Zoom call, is like a divine appointment, if you will, to make an impact in their life. That they leave that 5 minutes or 1 hour feeling like their life or their day is just a little bit better because they encountered you. And so if you can do that, guess what? You are the opposite of most sales interactions they've ever had in their life. You immediately separate yourself, and they see that your heart's in it and that you're actually for them, even up to and including asking permission, giving them options and saying, hey, you might want to consider this. This is what I think, but only you can make the right decision for your family or for your company if you want to purchase this or not. And whatever decision you ultimately make, I want to stand behind and support that decision for you because it's in your best interest.
That's fantastic. So can you give me a practical example of asking permission? So just an example with one of your clients of how you could ask permission.
Yeah, I ask permission if I can ask them questions. And again, it seems some people are like, that's so weird because of course they're expecting you to ask questions, or they're expecting you to talk about ASLAN or the predictive index, your products and services. But I still ask permission because I want to know that they're receptive. If you start to sense that they are not following you, that they're not open and receptive, you stop selling. Nothing else you say, no amount of logic, nothing about price, nothing else that you say is going to matter at that point if their ears, their head, their heart are unreceptive to the message. You have to stop selling and you have to actually tend to the relationship. There's not the level of trust. There's not the unfiltered truth. There's not those things that are the fertile soil for which you can actually sell a product or service into. See, that's where your focus needs to be, not on your product or service. We talk about taking the trip. And that is that you try literally in a 5-minute phone call or an hour meeting to walk a mile in their shoes with empathy, to truly understand where they're coming from, in hopes that they do take the trip with you back, that they'll follow your lead at that point, but if and only if they feel heard, respected, valued, understood.
So I'm going to make this super practical because I have a recent example. I visited with a business owner I had never met before. We just communicated online a little bit. And one of the things I've learned in this book and other sales training is get them to talk about themselves. And
That's
so
right.
I was like, I'm going to do great. I was so excited. And I sat down with this business owner, and literally before I even hit the seat, he was like, what's the C12 thing? Tell me about it. And I let him guide the conversation. And so I talked about C12. We had a great conversation, but I left feeling really disappointed in myself of like, hey, I went with an intention to just learn about this person and got pulled in. So in a situation like that, what does it look like to to do this? To how would you have turned that situation around?
Yeah, we say, don't take the bait, take the trip. And we are so eager. Most people in sales are proactive and driven and impatient and those sorts of things, which are great traits and strengths, but also mean typically you're a terrible active listener and you're constantly thinking about the next thing and where you want to take the conversation, and you aren't in the moment. And so get into the moment and don't take the bait. You took the bait. I have taken the bait so many times in a good way. They say, hey, we've heard about you, or we're at your website or whatever, or you were referred to us. Tell us what you have going on with Wake Effect. Tell us what you do with ASLAN. And I go, oh, great. I want to tell you all about my world. And we train people to say, you're not allowed to start talking about your world until you've taken the trip and you fully understand their world. And so I've failed at that so many times. Yeah. But I have to remind myself, and in the moment, right, it's hard, but you say, you know what, I can't wait to tell you about what we have going on at ASLAN and Wake Effect. But honestly, I'm here to learn about you. The most important thing here is you, and here's a form of dropping the rope. I don't know that our product or services are right for you or your organization or your team. Yeah. I want to get to know that. I want to get to know where you're headed, where you see a year or 2 years from now down the road. What's your vision? What's your goals? And you know what? It may be a competitor of ours, or it may be something else altogether different that I want to recommend to you that has nothing to do with ASLAN or the predictive index. And if I've helped you along that journey, then I'm going to sleep better at night. And hopefully you will as well. So that's a way that he said, oh, C12, tell me all about it. And you are so eager and passionate about C12 and your work there, you jump in. Yeah. That's make the decision to be other-centered, because as we're in a radio station right here, people's favorite radio station is What's in It for Me, WIIFM, and we have to make that conscious decision to go, nope, them before us, their business, their needs, their goals before mine.
Yeah, I love that, and I need that reminder. I need to have that written on a note card before I go into every meeting, because I truly do enjoy when you and I met, just hearing your story and what God has done in your life and in your business and your career. I love that. I love connecting with people, and somehow when we go into a meeting where it's with a prospect, suddenly it's like that part of our brain turns off. The part that would have been natural if you were a new friend, or I met you at church. Those are the things I want to know. Who are you? What are you all about? Right. And then suddenly when we switch into the sales mode, it's like that part of our brain turns off, and we're like, no, I'll talk about me. But I love that. Be other-centered, be focused on what they need. So you mentioned, I always like to repeat the 2 P's, which are pressure
and priority.
Mm-hmm. So the person you're with is the priority. You make them the priority in the conversation. And just acknowledge the pressure, release the pressure of feeling like you have to convert this sale.
That's right.
And ultimately, what I love, one of the things my husband told me when I started this C12 journey is that it's my job to set the table. God's going to bring the guests.
That's right.
So I repeat this over and over to myself when I'm feeling stressed about who's going to be at that table and my growth and my goals. Is just that I can hold it with open hands and say, okay, God, I'm going to do my job. My job is to approach each of these conversations, be other-centered, be thoughtful, be kind, and you can do the rest. So I think that's one of the things that we as believers have that other people don't have that. They can't lead with that approach, and it's much easier to be other-centered when we know our hope is in Christ.
That's right.
So we have a few more minutes. Are there any other last-minute thoughts you have for our listeners as they think about their own roles and how sales impacts their daily life?
I like where you were just going there, and that's been something that I've worked through a lot, and God's grown me a lot in, especially when it's like, hey, here's a month and no money's coming in, right? It's like, what do I do? And, God's a good God that delights in giving good gifts to his children. Amen. He's faithful even when we aren't. Yeah. And consider the lilies of the field and how he adorns them, and the birds of the sparrows and how he feeds them. And are you not more important than these? Yeah. And so, again, it's a good place for me to be of like total dependence that, I don't get a paycheck every other week or once a month. I don't. And so it's just that place of trust. I think in the world of sales, going in with living in reality that if God doesn't work or move or provide, nothing's going to happen, and that you do need Him, and so you just be faithful to work hard, be faithful to practice, be faithful at your trade, and to get better and better and train and do those things. Those are very important. You don't just sit back. But at the very foundation of it is that He's going to provide, and you believe that. And so go in curious and expectant to see how that's going to play out.
Amen. I can't think of a better note to end this conversation on. And here we're at the end of our second episode, and I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours about these topics and that are just so relevant and applicable to our listeners. So, Scott, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany.
I'm going to make sure that Scott's information is linked in our show notes. So if you're listening live, go to 323podcast.com and you'll find the show notes there or on your favorite podcast platform. So until we meet again, thanks so much, Scott.
You bet.
If God is writing a story in your workplace, we'd love to hear about it. You can share it with us by visiting 323podcast.com. That's the numbers 323podcast.com. We'll be back again next week with more great conversations on connecting your Sunday faith to your Monday life. Until then, may God bless your work this week. May He renew your strength, deepen your joy, and remind you that you're serving Him in all you do.